Kingdom Hearts 3 is a mixed bag for me. The gameplay is fast and varied. The new music and reworked tracks are exceptional. The worlds look absolutely stunning, and the story brings conclusions to quite a few things that have sorely needed them. In contrast, many of the worlds feel disconnected from the main story entirely. The pacing is all over the place, and all of our favorite Final Fantasy characters are completely missing from the game. But let's break this all down. The bulk of this review will have no spoilers, but I will be talking mechanics while showing the first world and the B-roll. Towards the end of the review, the spoiler gloves come off, but I will be sure to call this out. The combat in KH3 has incorporated bits and pieces from many games in the series, and it all comes together spectacularly. Sora feels incredibly powerful and has an option for almost every situation. Keyblade transformations, team attacks, magic combos, and the new attraction moves are just the tip of the iceberg. Mobility-wise, Sora also has access to flow motion, shot-lock dashes, standard dashes, and can even run up walls or buildings. This freedom of movement and combat allows for some really unique and interesting battles, while still allowing the player to run wild in basic fights. Sora winds up being too powerful in some ways, though, as regular fights are over in moments. Sora alone can deal a full health bar of damage to most enemies in one combo, and the attractions trivialize most encounters. Donald and Goofy have become more proficient as well, being able to handle Heartless on their own. Boss fights are fairly simple. Most of them boil down to wailing on the boss until you can advance your Keyblade or one of your special moves is charged, then dealing massive damage. Some bosses add in vulnerable phases to stall this, but once these are over, the boss is susceptible all over again. The last set of bosses, however, add more mechanics to prevent this, and the final boss actually feels dangerous, with some powerful moves with interesting timings. The music is stellar. Remixes of beloved themes meet with new versions of tracks from the Disney worlds you go to, with quite a few sticking with me well after I left the world behind. The new version of Sora's theme gives life to it, and the usage of it in the game as a recurring anthem of hope ties with his character quite well. KH3 was not afraid to use even pieces of old themes when characters are mentioned or shown. Even the attraction theme grew on me. The soundtrack really shines in the final 5 hours of the game, however, where characters' themes are woven into the battle themes or cutscenes masterfully. Sailing the Sea of Stars in your own abomination is the best it has ever been. The gummy ship sections are now replaced by open space, free for you to fly through with puzzles, enemies, and treasure to find. Some of these fights are very challenging as well, though the freedom to make your gummy ship whatever you like allows you to build turrets with wings or a wall covered in lasers. It's a shame the cutscenes still show the original ship, but this may be for the best. The main draw for me in Kingdom Hearts has always been the story. Roxas' decision in KH2 is one of my favorite moments in all of media. That said, I knew going into KH3 that there was no way I could get all the answers I wanted. There were so many plot threads laying over all the various games, how could they wrap them all up in this last game in the Xehanort saga? Not even to mention including the new Disney worlds and their stories. Sora, Donald, and Goofy travel to these new worlds to prepare for the final fight, and this is where the story begins to falter. The first 20 hours or so of the game feel like a glacial buildup as you play through Disney worlds that have almost no ties to the main plot. There are a few amazing moments where Disney characters get to interact with the Organization 13 members, but most of the time the Organization members might as well not even be there. This allows the Disney plots to take the main stage for this portion of the game, but unlike in the previous games, there are no Final Fantasy characters or KH characters to really change the flow of the story, leading a few of the worlds to just feel like straight retellings of their movies. There are even 2 different songs that are sung in their entirety, with the only difference being Sora running around in one of them. The lack of strong villains is felt even worse in the Disney worlds where you don't fight the main villain of the movie, and instead fight a giant heartless boss. Peppered throughout this, you get scenes of the KH characters, but most of those for the first half are merely reminders that you aren't ready yet. This makes the pacing of the main KH story, the story that many of us were waiting on, feel slow. The worlds are both vast and small at the same time, with most of them consisting of 3 to 4 zones, all of which are large but with little to do in them other than fight Heartless or search for treasure. One of the worlds, a series staple, is relegated to 2 screens and 1 minigame. In some of these worlds, the pacing is pretty quick, with you moving from zone to zone, finding waves of enemies and interesting mini-bosses. One of these worlds has you go up the same structure 3 times, only to be knocked down again each time, instead of getting to explore the interesting world that you know exists just beyond the boundary. The game will also stop you at times and force you to collect certain items before you can continue in the world, which grinds the world to a stop as you run around a small area collecting 300 items. The worst of all, though, is the returning hub world that has been cut down to 2 zones, stopping you from going to 3 areas that were very important to the story before, though you can still see them in cutscenes. Once the Disney worlds are out of the way, the main story kicks into high gear. You get a 5-hour ride that takes us through the battle we have been waiting for. Plot threads are picked up and tied off at a breakneck pace, resolving character arcs and calling out to nearly every game in the series, all while navigating some of the linear but crazy new worlds, one of which we have seen many times and finally get to go to. The story does suffer somewhat from this pace, giving very little time for some of the biggest and hardest hitting moments in the series. If this had been split up into the main game, it would have solved much of my problem with the pacing. Those last 5 hours are also marred by a few rough boss fights, including one you repeat 7 times. These are offset by some of the best boss fights in the entire series, including the final boss, which, like the previous games, is still a spectacle, but is also full of new mechanics. Not all of the main characters get as much screen time as others, and some of the main characters seem to barely do anything at all, but everyone gets at least one scene, even if those scenes aren't as impactful as others. Despite these complaints, however, I found the last 5 hours of the story to be incredible. An endless run of stories tying together, characters clashing, and some amazing set pieces. For fans of the series, there is no question in my mind that KH3 is worth it. The conclusion to so many things, even as it opens others for the future. None of that, however, erases the many problems I have with the game. For some people, the negatives I listed above will be enough to steer them away from KH3, and I cannot blame them. My hope, as always, was to give you more information, dear viewer, so that you may make up your own mind on whether to purchase it or not. Despite all the negatives I brought up, I enjoyed my time with Kingdom Hearts 3 quite a bit, and I am looking forward to the next journey these characters take. Above all, though, KH3 made me care about Sora in a way none of the other games have. He was always just Sora, the goofball who wanted to help people, but now he's joined Roxas, Axel, and Terra as one of my favorite characters in the series. I've been Trey, this has been the Full Spectrum, and for those avoiding spoilers, this would be the time to go. For those who are not, I would like to gush and vent about the story, with all spoilers being open. You have been warned. Axel, Roxas, and Xion finally getting to have a moment. Xion beginning to cry, then the three of them hugging was amazing. But getting to see them back on the Twilight Town Tower, and with Issa, Pence, Olette, and Hayter joining them broke me. These characters have fought, died, and returned for this, and they deserved it. In the same way, seeing Lingering Will, and then later Heartless Terra fight Terranort for control of their body again. Terra declaring the promise he had made all that time ago, as he did so broke me again. Kairi and her love for Sora being the only thing that held him together in the final world, allowing him to return and rescue everyone else's hearts, meaning Kairi finally got to do something, even if it wasn't combat related. Donald's Zeta Flare, Mickey's Ultima and Xehanort's Stopsa, Sully tossing Vanitas, the Dandelions, the final world itself, Ericus revealing himself to Xehanort, Kabi Riku saving Namine, Donald and Goofa stepping forward to go face Xehanort with Sora, the final battle with Xehanort, him flipping Kylum on you. All of these amazing moments I'm going to carry with me for quite some time. I knew Sora was going to leave at the end. It broke me all over again. I just wanted him and Kairi to be happy together, more than a few short moments. I was hoping we could have a good ending for everybody, even if just for a little while. But we know he'll be back. The relationship between Kairi and Sora grew leaps and bounds this time around. Their bond literally kept the other alive. All of this is why, despite the flaws I mentioned earlier, I cannot bring myself to hate this game. Quite the opposite, which is why this review was so hard to write. Let me know in the comments below where it fell for you. With all that said, I have been Trey. This has been the Full Spectrum. And remember to always enjoy the full spectrum Kingdom Hearts has to offer.